Welcome to Medieval Age Mysteries. Today, we delve into a topic often overlooked in historical narratives: the daunting challenges faced by women in the medieval age. From limited rights and autonomy to perilous health risks and social inequality, life for women in this era was a stark contrast to the romanticized tales of knights and chivalry. Women had few legal rights, often regarded as property of their fathers or husbands, which severely restricted their personal freedoms. Education, a privilege reserved for the fortunate few, offered little beyond basic literacy, further limiting their opportunities for intellectual growth. Join us as we uncover the tenfold challenges that shaped the lives of medieval women, shedding light on a past where resilience often overshadowed the shadows of adversity. This is Medieval Age Mysteries: Why You Couldn't Live as a Woman in the Medieval Age. In the medieval age, women faced severe limitations on their rights and autonomy. Legal systems often treated them as dependents, subject to the authority of their fathers or husbands. Women were often considered the property of their fathers or husbands, with little control over their own lives or decisions. Economic activities for women were limited. They could engage in trade or labor, but under strict supervision and with limited financial independence. Marriage often symbolized the transfer of a woman's legal rights from her father to her husband. Consent was rarely considered, reinforcing patriarchal control over women's lives. Legal rights for women were minimal. They had little recourse in cases of abuse or injustice, often at the mercy of male-dominated legal systems. Despite these challenges, some women sought intellectual pursuits and spiritual fulfillment, challenging the norms that confined them to subordinate roles. Today, women continue to fight for equal rights and autonomy, inspired by the resilience and courage of those who came before them. In the medieval age, educational opportunities for women were extremely limited. While boys could pursue learning and intellectual endeavors, girls were often confined to the home, learning only basic skills if they were lucky. For most girls, education meant learning basic literacy from their mothers, if their families even had access to books. Formal schooling was a privilege reserved for boys, who were seen as future leaders and scholars. While boys attended schools to study subjects like mathematics, philosophy, and science, girls were expected to focus on domestic duties. Their intellectual potential was often overlooked and undervalued. Even among the nobility, where some girls received private tutoring, their education was limited. They were taught skills deemed appropriate for managing a household, but rarely encouraged to explore subjects beyond basic literacy and etiquette. In religious institutions, some girls were taught to read religious texts. However, their education was still restricted to religious studies and did not extend to broader intellectual pursuits. The few women who aspired to higher learning faced significant barriers. Libraries and centers of knowledge were often off limits to them, guarded by societal norms that discouraged female education. The lack of educational opportunities in the medieval age prevented countless women from reaching their full potential. Today, as we celebrate progress in gender equality, we remember the struggles of those who came before us and continue to strive for a world where education is accessible to all. In the medieval age, health risks and limited medical care were significant challenges for women. Medical knowledge was rudimentary, and women often faced life-threatening situations, especially during childbirth. Childbirth was one of the most dangerous times for women. Without advanced medical knowledge and technology, many women died from complications that today would be easily treatable. Healthcare was limited and often ineffective. Healers relied on herbal remedies and superstitions, which provided little relief and sometimes did more harm than good. Many women and infants died due to the lack of proper medical care. The high mortality rate was a constant reminder of the harsh realities faced by women during this era. Hospitals were scarce and poorly equipped. Women suffering from illnesses or injuries had little hope of receiving adequate care, often enduring pain and suffering without relief. The lack of effective medical care and the high risks associated with childbirth and illness made life in the medieval age particularly perilous for women. Their health and well-being were constantly under threat, reflecting the broader struggles of medieval life. Today, advancements in medical science have drastically improved the safety and health of women. Reflecting on the past, we can appreciate the importance of continued progress in healthcare for all. In the medieval age, women faced restricted economic opportunities. Their roles were largely confined to homemakers or laborers in family businesses or farms, with limited chances to work independently or own property. Most women were expected to manage the household, taking care of cooking, cleaning, and raising children. Their work, though vital, was often undervalued and unpaid. On family farms, women labored tirelessly, performing strenuous tasks from dawn until dusk. Despite their hard work, they rarely had any control over the farm's operations or finances. In markets, women sold goods like vegetables, textiles, and crafts. These small-scale enterprises provided some economic activity, but offered little financial independence or stability. Even noblewomen, who lived in relative comfort, had restricted economic roles. Their primary duties were to manage the household and produce heirs, with significant decisions made by their fathers or husbands. Legally, women had few rights to own property or conduct business independently. In many cases, they could not inherit land or wealth, leaving them dependent on male relatives for their livelihood. Today, women have made significant strides in gaining economic independence and opportunities. Reflecting on the past, we recognize the importance of continuing to fight for gender equality in all areas of life. In the medieval age, women were often subject to strict social codes and legal systems that favored men. This inequality made it difficult for women to seek justice or escape abusive situations. Socially, women were expected to adhere to strict codes of conduct. Their behavior was heavily scrutinized, and stepping outside these norms could lead to severe repercussions. Legally, women had little standing. In courts, their testimonies were often considered less credible than those of men, making it hard for them to win cases or seek justice for wrongs committed against them. In cases of abuse, women had few options. Divorce was almost impossible, and societal norms often forced them to stay in abusive relationships with little hope for protection or escape. Women were also subject to exploitation in labor. They worked long hours under harsh conditions, often without fair compensation or rights, reflecting the broader social and legal inequalities of the time. Arranged marriages were common, with young girls often married off to much older men. These unions were more about property and alliances than personal choice, leaving women with little say in their own futures. While medieval women faced significant social and legal inequalities, today's society strives for greater gender equality and justice. Remembering the past helps us continue to advocate for the rights and freedoms of all women. The medieval age was marked by harsh and dangerous living conditions. Women, in particular, faced immense vulnerability during times of war, famine, and disease outbreaks. Famines were frequent, and food shortages were devastating. Women bore the brunt of ensuring their families were fed, often facing starvation themselves. Disease outbreaks like the Black Plague were catastrophic. Women, as caregivers, risked exposure while tending to the sick, often contracting illnesses themselves. War brought death and displacement. Women faced the loss of husbands, sons, and brothers, while also enduring the hardships of displacement and destruction. Raiding and pillaging were constant threats. Women often had to defend their homes and families while rebuilding their lives in the aftermath of such violence. Despite these challenges, medieval women showed remarkable resilience and solidarity. They supported each other through hardships, embodying strength in the face of adversity. While medieval women faced perilous living conditions, today's society works towards creating safer and more equitable environments for all. Remembering their struggles inspires us to build a better future. In the medieval age, child marriage and early motherhood were common practices that profoundly affected girls' lives. Girls were often married off at a young age, sometimes as early as 12 or 13 years old. These marriages were typically arranged for economic or social alliances rather than personal choice. Early motherhood was expected soon after marriage. Girls faced immense physical and emotional strain, often without the maturity or support needed to navigate such responsibilities. Childbirth was perilous in the medieval age. Young mothers, with their bodies still developing, faced significant health risks during pregnancy and labor. Girls were thrust into roles as caregivers and homemakers at a young age, often juggling the demands of childcare with their own physical and emotional needs. Child marriage and early motherhood deprived girls of their childhood and educational opportunities, perpetuating cycles of poverty and inequality. Today, efforts to end child marriage and support girls' education empower young women to shape their own futures, free from the burdens faced by their medieval counterparts. In the medieval age, poor sanitation and hygiene practices contributed to significant health challenges, impacting the lives of women in particular. Household hygiene was rudimentary. Women, responsible for cooking and cleaning, often worked in unclean environments, leading to frequent infections and illnesses. Public sanitation was minimal. Waste disposal was often inadequate, creating breeding grounds for diseases that spread quickly through densely populated areas. Access to clean water was limited. Women spent hours fetching water from contaminated sources, risking illness for their families in the process. Personal hygiene was a daily struggle. Women often lacked access to soap and clean clothing, further exposing them to health risks and discomfort. Poor sanitation and hygiene practices contributed to high mortality rates, especially among women and children who bore the brunt of preventable diseases. Today, advancements in sanitation and hygiene have vastly improved living conditions and health outcomes. Reflecting on the past reminds us of the importance of continued efforts to ensure clean water and sanitation for all. In the medieval age, religious institutions wielded immense power, imposing strict moral codes and rigid gender roles that profoundly affected women's lives. Religious doctrines often subjected women to harsh penalties for perceived transgressions. Accusations of witchcraft, for instance, led to brutal trials and executions. Women who sought spiritual fulfillment often entered convents, where they lived under strict rules and supervision, forfeiting personal freedoms in the name of religious devotion. Legal systems upheld by religious doctrines favored men, leaving women with little recourse in cases of injustice or abuse. Social norms dictated by religious teachings confined women to roles as homemakers and caretakers, denying them equal opportunities for education, employment, and leadership. Despite these challenges, medieval women demonstrated resilience and courage, navigating restrictive social and religious norms to assert their dignity and worth. Today, women continue to challenge and redefine societal and religious norms, striving for equal rights and opportunities in all aspects of life. In the medieval age, social mobility for women was severely restricted. Their opportunities to change their circumstances or improve their social standing were greatly limited. Social status for women was largely determined by birth and marriage. Noble women had privileges, but were confined to roles defined by their family's lineage and alliances. For common women, opportunities for social advancement were scarce. Most were born into peasant or laborer families, where survival often took precedence over personal aspirations. Political participation was almost non-existent for women. Decision-making roles in governance and community affairs were reserved for men, reinforcing gender-based social hierarchies. Access to education, crucial for social mobility, was largely denied to women. Learning opportunities were reserved for wealthy families and predominantly male scholars. Despite these challenges, some women sought to defy social norms and expand their horizons through art, literature, and charitable works, albeit with limited recognition. Today, women continue to challenge limitations and redefine their roles in society, advocating for equal opportunities and social mobility across all sectors. As we've explored, life for women in the medieval age was fraught with challenges across every facet of existence. From limited rights and autonomy to the harsh realities of health risks and dangerous living conditions, Medieval women faced a world shaped by strict social codes and pervasive inequalities. Despite these hardships, medieval women exhibited resilience and strength, carving out spaces for themselves within the constraints of their time. Their stories, though often overlooked, provide invaluable insights into the struggles and triumphs of women throughout history. As we reflect on these 10 reasons why living in the medieval age as a woman would have been so challenging, we honor their resilience and courage. Join us next time on Medieval Age Mysteries as we continue to uncover the untold stories and mysteries of the past.